Welcome to Parsnips and Parsimony. Today I'm canning dill pickles. I have been making dill pickles for many years. I've gotten asked for this video so many times and it is finally pickle season. So here's how I do it. I hope this video helps you and inspires you to try canning your own dill pickles. The printable version of this recipe will be linked in the description below, as well as the actual recipe. So if you don't need to print it, you'll find all of that down in the description below. A couple of the tools that you're going to want to have on hand for making your dill pickles will be a funnel. You can get these at any of your grocery stores, your hardware store. You can find them on Amazon. And you also want a pair of jar lifters. These are very important because I don't know of any other way to really safely remove my jars out of my canner when the water has been boiling. You will burn your hands. So these are, in my opinion, a complete necessity to have. Amazon has complete canning kits where you can just buy all of this together in one if you're new to canning. If not, garage sales, estate sales will have all these type of items, and usually they're pretty inexpensive. You will also need vinegar. This white vinegar in particular is 5% acidity. That's what you need to make sure of. So whatever white vinegar you get, make sure it has that 5% acidity. If it doesn't, it's going to mess with the safety of this recipe. So please don't use anything else other than the 5%. If you can get your hands on canning and pickling salt, this stuff works great. It really helps with keeping the color in your pickles and that you get the best quality that you can for your pickles. And lastly, you will need canning jars and canning rings and lids. For pickles, I like to use wide mouth jars. They're just easier to pack in here and make a better presentation. If you have small mouth, you can do that, but you're probably better doing slices, dill pickle slices and things like this. Today I'm doing spears, so you're going to want wide mouth jars, and also make sure that you are using canning jars because they have been tested and they're your best chance of having good success when canning. Always check for cracks or chips around the rim, so when I'm washing my jars in hot soapy water, I'm always feeling for any cracks, nicks, chips, anything like that, and I go through and do that to every jar every time I can. In this case, I'm feeling this one and there's some gunk on it, but it's not chipped. So I always double check and make sure they're safe, and also just generally inspecting the jars to make sure there's nothing wrong with them. And with that, we're going to start prepping our cucumbers and assembling all of our ingredients. So once we get started, we can just pack these hot jars quickly and get them processed. when you're choosing your cucumbers to use, there's some that I would use and there's some that just don't waste your time. The quality won't be there. So the first one are these little guys. I'm sure I am not the only one that gets these little misshapen cucumbers. This is from inconsistent watering in the garden. These really don't work well for pickling. The quality won't be good, and by the time you chop them up, you're certainly not going to have spears. And so don't use these guys. Use them for your salads, snack on them. Don't use them for pickling. Then you get these guys. These guys are oversized. They are going to be really seedy, and probably your pickle's going to turn out pretty mushy. In a pinch, you can use these. Again, quality will suffer. These are supposed to be Boston pickling cucumbers. Obviously, I missed a few in the patch and they got a little oversized. Then you have your slicers that get oversized, like these guys. Now this is what it should look like, and this is what happens when it gets too much water. Again, these will work. They're going to be more seedy, so your pickle will end up being a little bit more, I would say slimy, but slimy is not exactly the right word. It's just going to be more seedy. So you can use these guys, but again, quality is going to be a little bit of an issue. My favorite type of cucumber to use is like the little picklers, the little gherkins, and I've got a couple of those guys here. So this is a straight 8, this big long one here. This is a Boston pickling. These are really good if you're going to do them whole like this. These aren't quite long enough to do spears with. This guy would work well for spears. I'd have to cut him down a little bit, but he would work really well. This is another variety of, it's like a Boston pickler, but it's a little bit bigger. I don't remember the variety I got on this one. This one's a smidgen big, but he's gonna work just fine. And then this is another straight 8, but he's smaller. Again, these guys will work great for cutting up those spears. Use what you have, but knowing that it will affect the overall result when the product is done. Over the years, I've canned different types of cucumbers, and sometimes they work and sometimes the quality is just not so good. It's okay. Use what you have, but understand there are consequences to what you're using. Ultimately, you guys want to use these guys to make the best spears. You can see I have lots of straight 8s, I've got oversized ones, I've got baby ones, I've got misshapen ones. Together, all these should make between 5 and 7 quarts of spears, and we'll make it work, even if they're not all just the perfect cucumber. Before I wash all my cucumbers, I'm going to make my brine so that can start to simmer and be hot, because once this gets moving, we're going to take the jars out of the sterilized jars out of the canning pot. We're going to pack them with the prepped cucumbers, then we're going to immediately pour the hot brine on top of them. We're going to add the lids and the rings to them and then immediately start processing. So you want everything to be prepped and everything ready to go. You're going to need 8.5 cups of water. You're going to need 2¼ cups of white vinegar. Again, make sure that it is 5% acidity. It should say right on the label. And then you need 1/2 cup of your pickling salt. I always check my dill for caterpillars. First of all, I don't know if you guys can see this, but there is a dead fly on this, so we're just going to pick that off. Everything else was fine, and we can use that in the jars. I just harvested my garlic and it hasn't dried yet, so the skins are a little bit harder to remove right now. So that's why it's a little bit more challenging. Most of the time it doesn't take quite so long. If you have kiddos, this is an excellent job, something that they can work on in the kitchen next to you while you're prepping your cucumbers. Okay, let's talk about how much garlic and how much dill. There is no science to how much to put into each jar. I will usually put in 2 to 3 smaller sprigs or 1 giant sprig. It depends on how much dill you like. We like ours really dilly and we like it really garlicky. So the more dill you can put in there, the better, in our opinion. But you can play around with it. A safe bet is probably 2 to 3 sprigs. And when I'm talking sprigs, I'm talking nice size sprigs like these guys. And then as for the garlic, the recipe calls for 1 to 2 cloves per jar. Again, my cloves are homegrown. They're not always the same size. This is what I would consider 1 clove. I put 3 to 4 in each jar, depending on how much garlic I have. We love our pickled garlic in dill pickles. So I tend to put more garlic in it than less, but again, customize it to how you like it. Safely do 1 to 2 to try it out. And then if you're like us, and you really like it garlicky, next batch, add a couple more garlics to it. You can't go wrong. Everybody in my house loves the pickled garlic. We're going to remove about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch off of each end, particularly on the blossom end, because there's something that's in here, a chemical that actually keeps your pickles from getting crisp. So by cutting that off, we're going to remove that chemical. We won't have to deal with it, and then we're going to have nice crispy pickles. So the next section is going to go really fast here because I'm going to process, but I want to talk you through the whole process a little bit before you watch me do it. So I'm going to pull the canning jars out of the canner because they have been sterilized. I'm going to be very careful to try my best to keep everything nice and sterile. Now I'm going to be packing these cucumbers with my bare hands, so for sterilization purposes, it is what it is. But that's why we're going to process them afterwards. So try to keep everything, your surfaces nice and clean, keep everything hot and move quickly. So you're gonna see me pull them out of the canner. I'm going to start with a sprig of dill at the bottom of the jar, followed by my garlic. Then I will put in my cucumbers. And then on the top, I usually put, depending on the size of the dill, I'll put another garlic and another sprig of dill. And then I will set that off to the side. I'm gonna process those as fast as I can, and then you'll see me wiping down the tops of the jars with a damp paper towel just to make sure they are clean, and when I put the new lid on, it will seal tightly. So that's kind of the process you're gonna see, and once they are all packed, we will put them back into the canner for their processing time. So here we go. going to make sure you only tighten them hand tightness. I don't like the looks of this ring. If you can see right here, there's a big dent in it, and that's probably going to prevent this from sealing. So I'm going to recycle this ring and then grab a new one for this jar. Jars are in the boiling water. Unfortunately, I did, when I lowered them into the canner, I did hear one crack. I don't see any of that one jar, if it cracks, tends to float. I'm not seeing that, but I do think one of them cracked. So I left everything in there. It looks okay right now, but don't be surprised if that does happen periodically. A jar, when you put it into the canner, it will crack. That's why we really want to make sure everything is really hot, because I found that my success rate is a lot better when everything is piping hot and has been sterilized and all the brine is really hot, but sometimes this does happen. I'm showing you guys reality. So we're going to leave it in there for 15 minutes. I am going to set my timer for 15 minutes. I have the canner on high, so it's trying to get up to a boil. We'll process it for the 15 minutes, then I will take them out and we'll see if that one jar ended up breaking. Now, I did have extra cucumbers sliced that are left over. I could do more pickles, except I don't have enough to do another canner load, so I'm probably not going to do that. I will take these and put them just into a glass dish, not a covered dish. And then I have also extra brine in here, and that's probably just about enough to cover all those. So I will add more garlic, more dill, and I'm going to put them in the refrigerator, and they're going to act like refrigerator dill pickles. They won't be as strong because they aren't being processed, but within a week or two, we can pull them out and start enjoying them. And it's a great way to make sure I don't waste the cukes that I've already cut up and the brine. Everybody loves an early season pickle, so this is a win-win situation for both of us. This particular recipe, you're going to want to let them absorb the brine and the flavors and the garlic and all of that for at least 6 weeks on your shelf after you've processed them. We like to leave them closer to 4 to 6 months because that flavor gets really intense. But if you can't wait that long, give them at least 6 weeks on the shelf before you open your first jar. But the flavor will only improve as the time goes on. All right, we have one floating jar. That's the jar that cracked. That's the one that we can't use. But everything else looks good. Very carefully, we're going to lift this up. This one's gonna drain out, so I'm gonna have to take a minute, and then I'm just gonna move it over to a cutting board. So I covered the jars because I want the heat to be stable. I don't want drafts to be on those jars. I want them to just stay here and cool evenly. I just tossed the dish towel over it to help keep that a little bit more even with its cooling process. But other than that, I'm going to let these rest. I will probably remove them when they start to cool down to my dining room table where they can rest for 24 hours before I remove the rings from them. I don't like to do it any sooner than that. I really want to give the lid time to seal really well, and then I can remove that ring and just use the ring for other canning projects. But the recipe is, again, all down in the description below. If you give it a try, please let me know what you think, if you enjoy them, if you like them. Any questions, comments, leave them down in the comments below. As always, thank you for coming along. I hope this inspires you to try canning your own dill pickles. Don't forget, they need to set for at least 6 weeks for their best flavor, and I'll see you for our next video. Bye. And if you're wondering, how will you know if all of the jars are sealed? Because I guess we need to know if they're sealed to be put away. On the top of all the jars, there's an indent, and these will pop down. So you'll hear these if you're in the kitchen, just start going pop, 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 and that's when you know the jars are sealed. If there's any question after 24 hours, you can test them, and if you feel the bubble, then they didn't seal, and if it sinks in and there's, you know, there's no bubble there, then they've sealed. If there is a bubble and when you touch it and then it sucks down, it's sealed, but I say it's not a really good seal. This is my own opinion. So I will indicate that we want to use that one first. I'll let it sit on the shelf for 6 weeks. I will pay attention to make sure nothing happens to it. But if it didn't seal naturally, but it sealed when I pushed it, it probably doesn't have a really tight seal. So I want to use that guy first.